And I want to stay on this story. I want to learn more about how we can talk about this issue. And we've brought on Kathy Peters with the Center for Family Life and Recovery here to discuss this further, here to talk about prevention, here to talk about if we see a family member who we suspect could be going through some difficult times, how we can move forward and how we can be of help. First thing I want to ask though, what is, and the reason I ask this because we've been called out before on from viewers, people who are sensitive to this. What is the proper terminology?
Well, we talk about completed suicide, and so that's the terminology that we do use.
And I think it's important to explain why that's important to say it that way.
Well, I just think it's a more sensitive way to address it.
Okay, simply put,
Yes.
and I'm with you. Okay, so let's talk about this. Warning signs. We have a family member or a friend that we see is in any sort of discomfort, having a difficult time. What do we need to take into consideration?
Well, there are usually signs. They're subtle, you know, obviously anybody who's in this position that, you know, we can only imagine being at the depths of despair that someone might be in with this. And so those subtle signs that you're looking for, and you start wondering, you know, this little voice in your head says, is this person having a real problem? And the first thing to do is just ask. Now, I say that in a real simple way.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to ask. It's a difficult conversation to have with even your closest friends or family members, but that starts the conversation. And so once you get to talking to them and then start listening to them and why it is that they're considering suicide, and then thinking about ways that, you know, their reasons, things that might want them to, you know, to keep going in life, and not giving them your reasons for continuing in life, but exploring with them the things that might help them to keep living.
Okay, so I want to walk through kind of a scenario, I suppose. I often do this. So we ask that, we say, you know, you say that simple question, how are they doing? Or, but that person, I would suspect, and maybe I'm wrong, would they say, well, I'm considering suicide? I feel like that wouldn't come up.
Well, no, and not right away. And they're going to say things like, I'm struggling, or I'm having a difficult time, or I'm feeling depressed, or whatever. And that's when we come out with the question, are you considering suicide? And if you ask that blunt question, they're going to answer you. In most cases. In most cases.
And I think too, you mentioned, you know, you have this feeling. A lot of times people don't want, they kind of disregard it. We need to take that into consideration.
Right, and you have to act on that. And it is uncomfortable, obviously. You know, this is not the same as how are you this morning kind of conversation. And so when we start talking about that and then stopping to listen to them, because part of it is we're afraid of the answer that we're going to get, because now what do we do? Someone has said to us, you know, someone that we love dearly has said to us that they're considering suicide. And so now, what do we do? So we want to spend time with them. We want to be there for them, just be present with them, ask them questions, listen to what it is they have to say.
What about, and I want to spend more time on this because I think it's so important. What about when it reaches a point where it's not something that we can handle? You need, I'll say, a professional.
Right.
When do we know that we've crossed that threshold?
And actually that's step 3, so that's going right into the next one, because at that point you want to get them connected. And so, yeah, it's beyond us of how we can help them, get them connected to those professionals. And you want to start with, if it's an emergency, then 911, calling MCAT, calling the National Prevention Hotline, and I know you have those numbers on the screen. So those are there available for people, but staying right there with them and helping them make those calls, helping them get connected like that, so that they can talk to that next person and that can help them through that, you know, that next step.
And then real quickly, on the other side of this, family members who have a loved one who has completed suicide, briefly, how do they cope? What do we say to them?
You know, it's a tough thing. There's not a magical answer, and there's no way of jumping over the grief process and speeding that process up. It happens, you know, that knot in your stomach that happens when you lose somebody, it stays there. but you eventually get over it, you know. So talking with someone else, talking with friends, you know, comforting each other is going to help with that. Maybe there's a need for some counseling for you if you're dealing with that, and not being afraid to say, I need help.
Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Thank you. I appreciate having this conversation.
I think
not easy.
It's an important conversation, and I really appreciate you being here for that. Kathy Peters with the Center for Family Life and Recovery. We have more to come.